Hey there, welcome back guys. This video is for those who are new to FPV and perhaps you have the Pavo Pico or some other drone, have never soldered before and just want to dive into it but don't want to ruin the flight controller, right? So what you want to do is before soldering on the flight controller and before you take it apart, there's actually a video and a link in the description below to me putting the GPS, all right, on this unit here. So you can watch that video, but remember before I actually went and took that thing apart, I was using the flight controller practice board and there's the Mute FPVs. I'll leave a link to these in the description below too. But you just practice until you get it right and until you're comfortable and ready to work on the flight controller. Because remember, on the flight controller, you're only going to get one take. And if you screw it up, that's it. You're going to have to get another one. Not a new drone, no, but just the flight controller, and they're about 40 or 50 bucks, which is really expensive. So you practice on there, and what you're going to need, let me just put this back, before you start soldering, is a set of these, right? So if you wear glasses, you take off your glasses and you find the lens that's just right for you, and you put these on, and you might look like Data from Star Trek, but they do the trick, and they give everything you need, that kick, so that you can just see, and it looks 3D, and you just tap it with the tip of your soldering iron. Of course, you have to flux it first, right? And then, well, let me just show you without any further ado so we can just dive into it, okay? So let's get started. Okay, so this is the flight controller practice board, and like always, you want to start off on the big ones and work your way onto the smaller ones. And let's say if you get too much solder in one particular area, what you can do is, you could use a brush or whatever. Just put some flux on it, on that one particular area that has too much solder, right? I'm not sure you can see. Just put some flux on it, right? And move whatever it is you have to the side. Then you have the solder wick, right, which looks like this. It's really cheap. And then you move everything out of the way that could possibly melt by accident, because sometimes you might burn your finger and you could drop the soldering iron, etc. Just move out of the way, just to get it as you need it. And then what happens is you take the soldering iron, of course put your glasses, your magnifier on, right? If you can. In this case I somewhat can. Oh yeah, this is great. And then you just put it there and then you just wipe it. See that? Got it off on that side. Just move it around. See that? And let me see if I can see it. Yeah, wow. Solder was coming off. And you don't want it to stick. And you'll see it'll just absorb it, in that one particular area. It's melted. To some extent. Yep. And if it's not working, check your soldering iron, because the some good soldering irons go to sleep, and now the temperature should be just right to use the solder wick. And then you just do that. You'll know it's working because you can hardly touch it. And then, voila, look at that. Got some solder off. And then you can see it's right on there underneath, right? So you can flip it over and use the other side. And just wipe it like that. See? And you don't want to press on it, because if it, too hard. Because if you do, what'll happen is then you just cut off the other piece, or you can just continue using it. depending, you know, how, so let's say in my case, I'm gonna just cut that one piece off and then just continue using it. Don't need that one. Right, so now I got a fresh piece of the wick. There's still some flux on there, right? And then just do like that. And as you can see, voila, most of the solder is removed. Because thanks to the solder wick. And if you hold it, right, which is what you don't want to do, because then the solder, the wick will just stick to it. Okay, and as you can see, I remove that big glob, and you can just continue doing that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that this is the GPS unit that you want to attach to your flight controller, and this is the practice board. Okay, this is the practice flight controller board. Make sure your soldering iron is away from there. So what you want to do is I'm going to put the soldering iron back, and always remember to tin your soldering iron. And you know it's tin when it looks like this. See that? Look at that. Look at the tip. Okay. I'm just going to put it back. Okay, so what you want to do is first get your flux, right? And put flux on the areas that are going to be soldered. Okay? So let's say we're going to start off on a big one, a fresh one, right? We're going to do on that one. We're going to solder right there. So we just want to put some on, because what will happen is the solder will go into that one particular area because it needs something to bind to. It helps it melt. And then what we're going to do is a tricky one, right? We're going to try and solder 2 wires together. And you don't want too much flux overflowing, because you just need it where it needs to go. And we're going to solder 2 wires together, right so close, but so far, because you don't want it touching. Okay, once it touches, that's it, and you have continuity, and you're pretty much screwed. Okay, and this, I don't need, usually you could solder like this and put your head in, but since the camera is here, for the sake of the video, I'm going to have to bring this up. And I wouldn't recommend doing this. If you do use a surface, make sure it's metal, because, I mean, I don't use this anymore, but the heat, you know, could penetrate through and then just leave a remnants of a stain of burnt something. Okay, so we're going to start with the first one. Actually, we're going to put a little more flux, because we're going to do a total of 4 connections. Okay, so we got one there, one there. Actually, let's pretend this is the flight controller, right? Because on the flight controller, you're going to have 4 wires together. Just put a little bit there. You know, and as you get better at this, you'll be fine. So we got 1, 2, 3, right? This is the third one. And the fourth one, because that's pretty much how it's going to be on the flight controller. All right. If you have good eyes, you might not need the magnifying glasses. Let me see if I can see it to some extent. I'm going to do the big one first, and then the other one next. I might have to bring it up some. All right. So let's say first we want to do this wire. Okay. So you just want to tap it, right? Tap it, tap. There we go. I can see now. Okay. So first we're going to put a little bit of solder on. Okay. For me, everyone has a technique. I'm going to do 2 different techniques here. Okay. One is going to be like this. Just like putting enough solder, letting it work its magic. Right? Putting enough so it's just right there. Just blowing it out. See how it goes in that little square? Okay? So now I'm going to put one wire in there, but not the wires that we're going to be using for the, pretend GPS unit. So you just hold it there. The wires, if you're working with new wires, you'll want to flux them. Not flux them, you want to tin them. So what you'll do is normally what I would do is I would dip this in there, right, like that, and then use something to hold the wire. And as the wire was being held, I would, you would tin them. But it's like, I need 3 hands. How do I do this? Normally, what you can do is not hold it like this, but you can do like that. Get a little bit of solder on the wire. On the unit, on the soldering iron, and voila. See, now the wire's tinned, which is really cool, which is what you want. See, look, I don't know if you can see it, but look at that. That's one way to do it. And of course, be careful because solder does splatter. I should have done this on the iPhone, like the other video, instead of the Osmo action, because sometimes it splats. All right. So, and then you want to sometimes dip the soldering iron. See how it was a little bit corroded into this thing. I'll show you that little brutal type thing, because I already tinned my tip. As you can see, every time you do that, it brings out the shine again, and you want that tin. Okay. All right. So now we're going there. So remember, I'm only gonna solder the tinned part of the wire, which is that part right there. Okay, so now, in this case, I can just put it right there on the side and wait for the solder to melt a little bit. Sometimes I don't have the temperature too high, but there we go. Voila. So that one's there. And sometimes you just hold it, but this is not a good connection because, as you can see, it's protruding out a little bit. Almost touching the other connector. So what you really want to do is spin it around and then hold it in. Wait for the solder to melt, and it's melting, and then just let it touch. And it dries, it cools off so fast. That was easy. See, and then you have a connection. Now, remember we put 4, and the board is hot. So we have 4 connections over there. So we're going to put little droplets of solder there. I might have to move to the side a little bit so I can see it, because it's a little bit tricky. Actually, maybe here. Oh yeah, that's a good view. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little bit of solder. So the trick is, this is my trick. Everyone has different, but this is how I did my flight controller. What I did was, I have the glasses on. I just tapped it. I got 1 drop, 2 drop, and a little, just a little. That's it. And I'll show you what we do next. 3 drop. Oops. And 4 drop. Almost 4. Okay. Now if I'm going to do now to test it, right? Because you want to make sure that one's okay. I think I need 1 more drop. Now you want to make sure that you have just the right amount. Perfect. That's good. All right. And then you just, you rub it off, or you put the soldering iron in the sponge, let it dab a little bit. Now, to test it, you want to make sure that nothing is touching, okay? Let me see if I can see. Yep, nothing's touching. Awesome. And you will know when you look through the glasses. I'm going to see if I can hold it up so that you guys can see. It's a little bit hard to see, but you'll be able to tell. And if you can't see too well, even with the magnifying glasses, right? What you can do is, if you have a multimeter, run a continuity check. So continuity just lets you know if there's a connection, solid connection between two metal points, right? So if this thing beeps when I touch two different connectors, then we know the soldering job is fucked up. Nope. Nope. Oops, I was touching the wrong one. Nope. Nothing. Okay, and then you will know that. See, the wires touch, and this is, I'll let you see the meter here. If the wires touch, if I, somehow cause a little bit of a leak, nope, nothing, which is great. And if there was, the meter would, see, light up. But what's not over yet, because you can still mess things up as you're soldering, and the solder could melt. That's where the glasses come in. So let's pretend this is the GPS unit. It's really cool. You're like, I have this one. I don't know why you got this one. This one's an okay one, but it shorted out if you wire it wrong. So on that note, just remember the correct wiring. So we're going to do the white wire and the yellow wire. Okay. So on that note, this is the tricky part because I'm trying to film the video and do this at the same time. All right, let's see. I'm just going to move the multimeter. Remember, move everything out of the way that could possibly melt if you drop the soldering iron accidentally. All right, let's see. Nice. All right. So you're just going to tap it. That's one. Okay, and you'll be able to see it when you have your glasses on. And let me see, and then, or if you have helping hands, that's two. Now I'm going to do, I always leave the the current stuff for last. Okay, and if you see how I'm holding the soldering iron, always make sure that this is as far away as possible because you never want to accidentally burn the cord. And then you'll short everything out in the house. Ground and voltage. Usually the ground is out on the outside on some of these flight controllers. So again, I'm going to tap it. Oops. I have to something up with the wire, and you'll be able to see that. Something up with the wire. Even though it's tin, because a lot of these wires come already tin. There. And you can always cut that. No, this is fine. All right, so let's see. So now we're just going to try that again. And you see that's a little bit too long. And the reason why it's too long is because they're not supposed to touch. That's why they leave them so short. Yep, that should do the trick. And then we're going to cut it one more. Okay. And this is a good wire, but remember, now that it's cut, I have to tin it because lost some of that magic flux. So to tin it's really easy. Okay, I'm gonna put some solder onto the soldering iron, and you'll be able to get the solder to stick to the soldering iron if your soldering iron is tinned correctly. Nice. So that was really cool. It just like went up like a straw. Cool. And that's what the flux does. So now I'm going to solder that wire here. Okay. Let's see. Nice. That's a good one. And last but least is the ground. And the ground's already tinned. When you buy these units, some of them come already tinned, but since, as you can see, I had already used this before, and I put a different one in. I lost some of its magic touch. Whoops. That's not a good one. Hold on, I have to fix this. Just fixing the wire. Only because it's a little bit frayed. Because we had used this before. This is the one that actually shorted out there. So now I'm going to put a little more solder onto the soldering iron because I'm going to re-tin this. Hold on a second. Nice. Okay. So on that note, now we go back to where we were. It's really tricky. And you want to make sure the wires are out of the way from the soldering iron tip. And then you want to make sure your soldering tip is clean. Got some junk on there. And then you could retin it. Whoa. If you want. Whoa. I have a smoke detector in here. So if you have smoke detectors, make sure that nice. So now the soldering iron is retinned. Look at that. Because there was some junk on there. And you don't want remnants of old wire in there. But now it's tinned. See that? Okay, to some extent. The hardest part is looking through the goggles and trying to solder at the same time. And it's done. Alright, let's see. And now, look at that. Oh, nice. That's a pretty clean solder job. And then I believe there's another wire that we were going to do. So now this one, let's say this doesn't work for you. You know, you can't do it like that with soldering it. Your hands shake. You know, my hands are fine, but some people have shaky hands. So the trick to that is you're going to use your magnifying glasses, right? And then just cut a piece as small as it can be, right? By looking at in your goggles or glasses or whatever you want to call them. Cutting it so small enough that it's going to be the piece, right, that fits on the part that already has flux on it. We'll do this one, okay? Because the flux is going to help it stick. And actually, I got some flux on. Just going to move it around. There. I'm going to put it on that piece, okay? And just get it where it needs to go. Now you want to make sure there's no flux. I already cut the piece on the tweezers, right? Or you can have another set of tweezers, but in this case I'm going to use the sponge from the soldering iron. So maybe that side. If you put it back that way so that you don't use the flux, and then rinse the sponge when you're done. All right, so see, it still has flux on it. Just want to get it, you want to get all the flux off. Not all, but just enough, because what happens is if there's flux on it, remember, put the sponge back with the wet side, not the flux side, because otherwise you're going to screw things up. Okay, or just have another sponge handy. So what? There's that little piece, right, that I just cut. And then I'm going to take it with the tweezers, right, if I can. It's really hard to see. And you might, this is a little bit of a bigger piece, but you're going to have to cut it smaller. And then you just lay it out, right, put it in the center of wherever the spot is. You want it to be dead on center, because if it's not, you're not going to have it centered, because you want to leave room for the ripple effect to happen as it melts, and you don't want it to go over any existing connections or connect, right? So again, once you get everything, move everything out of the way that could possibly melt before you begin. And now, that's the only piece of what we're going to work on. All right. So then what you do is, of course, you get your glasses again. It's really hard to see because usually you have it in front of you. And then it's there. So I have the piece there. So and you just want to make sure that the solder is on the square, right? Because that's the piece we were doing, so it doesn't protrude over. That's why you only want your flux to be within the perimeters of the area that you're soldering, and leave buffer for no excess. If that makes any sense, you don't want the solder to go over, and it won't stick if there's no flux in that particular area. All right, so on that note, so we're gonna solder a different one. We're going to solder these two together. Okay. So you just tap it, let it melt, and wait for it. Voila. And now, moment of truth. See that? Well, actually, after you're done, you should scrub off the tip. See, it's still tinned. Right. And now the moment of truth. See that? Actually, the moment of truth will be in a second, because, all right, we're going to check for continuity. Continuity is to see if there's a connection between two pieces of metal that shouldn't be there. For example, if it's wrong, you're going to hear a beep. So most likely there'll be a beep by touching these two wires, because this connects to that. But there should not be a beep, right? And if you guys can see, if I connect this one and that one, okay? Nothing. But this one and that one. And it's just fine, because that's the connection we want. Now, for the flight, the GPS unit, right? There should be no connection between any of the wires. So let's say I touch that one, nothing, nothing, nothing. And then you do the same thing with the other one. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And as you can see, that would tell you if there's something. But now, to make sure the soldering connection is legit, right, to make sure that it actually does work, you want to take another piece of wire that's tinned, right? And then just run it through, I'm going to run it through, if I can see, through the first hole. Okay? Now we want there to be continuity. I'm going to have to bring this closer to me because I can't see. So like I was saying, you want there to be continuity within this connection, because it's going to, you want to make sure that you did everything correctly, right? So on that note, it's really hard to see, but you're gonna, you have to do it. Great. So that went in, and I believe this one is the red wire. Okay. So there should be continuity between this wire, right, and the red connection or connector, whatever you want to call it. All right, so I lost the connection, but the good thing is that the wire is tinned. All right. Usually it goes right through, but it's not. So there should be a connection between here, right, and the other red one. And it doesn't matter which color you use for continuity. But what matters is that we got continuity, which is great. And then you're going to try it in the next hole, okay? Because then we know when you plug this in to the flight controller, right, that it actually works. That like if something's wrong, then it's your wiring. You'll see it light up, so that won't be an issue. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. All right, so this is going to be, let me see what the second wire is. The second wire is yellow, okay? All right, let me just... So I should be able to hold this, right? Hold that like that. And tap the yellow, and I should hear a beep. Is it yellow? Is it black? Is it red? It has to be. Okay, so something's wrong with that one. Either something's wrong with that one, or actually just wrap it around to make the connection more secure. Something's probably not touching. So what you'll do is we'll just go back, stretch the wire out a little bit, right? And then maybe you'll have to cut it. This is just for testing purposes, okay? That one's not working. Maybe it was used too many times. So what we'll do is we'll just cut it. Voila. And then we'll just put it in. So now we're going to try the second one. Ah, yeah, I heard that click. That's a good one. Okay, so now we're going to test the yellow one. There. So we know that one works, okay? And we can see on the meter. See? Perfect. All right, so now we're going to test one more and then just call it quits. So the second one, I just need to be able to see with my googly eyes. We're going to do the third one. And the third one, I believe, is the red, is the voltage. Okay? So again, put it down. You have that here. And the multimeter should be red, green or blue. Let's see. Hold on, something's not connecting. Oh, I see. Oh, it's just really tricky. When it doesn't work, what you got to do is make the wire a little bit. Oh, that should be the white one. Okay, so I put it in the second hole. So that's actually the white wire. And the red is on the other side, okay? Okay, so let's see. So the white wire should be... Yep, that's the white. So you always have to follow it to see which one goes where. So that's the white. See that? So now I want to put the red. So the red is the last one on the other side. Even though the red is the second one here, the red is the second one here on the flight controller, the red is actually the last one on that one. And that's going to be a wiring experience too, okay? So on that note, I have to put it in here into the last one, plug it in, right? And then make sure that's connected like that. You could use alligator clips if you have. That would solve the problem with wrapping the wire around. And now the red should be, yep, and it works. And the reason why, somebody like, why is he doing that? Because if you put the flight controller back together, right, and then the unit looks like this, some of you might just say, fuck it, I'm just putting the shit back together. You put it back together, and then you find out that there's continuity between two connections there. You're going to have to take this apart and then resolder it, use the wick, it's called a desoldering wick, and then go back to square one. So preventative is always better than damage control, and it'll save you lots of time. So now we know, and you want to do that with your connections to make sure it works, because you're going to be manhandling things to get them back in place, especially if you're going to be putting the Pavo Pico back together. It's really tricky, and things, you're like, oh my God, am I going to disconnect something? But you won't. And if you did this correctly, you'll be fine. The worst case that if you practice on the flight controller practice board, right, before working on the actual flight controller, you'll be okay. Don't jump right into the flight controller. This is actually a pretty good soldering connection when I think about it. You guys can see, not bad. And remember, the wiring has to be according to whatever the diagram is. Let me see if I can see this. Oh yeah, nice. It's a pretty good job. I'll take a picture of it so that you guys can see how it looks in the video. Looks fair. It's fair. And you want it to just be solid and work, and that's it. So I hope this video helped you and better understanding on how to solder your flight controller so that you could attach a GPS unit to it, or even a compass. I believe there's a compass you can put on it to have a more elaborate flight experience with your Pavo Pico or whatever it is you decide to fly. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below, or ideas for other videos, and I'll see you all next time.